Hello everybody and welcome back to another Oscar prediction update video. The past couple of months I did it pretty late in the month, but now I'm doing this one pretty early in the month. And there is a good reason, even though it hasn't been that long since the last update, there have been a lot of significant changes because of the fall film festivals. As of right now, a lot of big movies have premiered, and so a lot of the question marks that we had about certain contenders, they have now been answered. We now understand what movies generally are going to be contenders and what movies generally are not. And I'm going to go over those as we go through the predictions. Now, the first three categories, there really isn't that much to say. Best Documentary Feature, I have moved Everybody in there because I think that that's going to be very timely, the subject matter, but I literally have not changed anything else. In the category of Best International Feature, I did change. Okay, so this is around the time where we're starting to find out what movies are getting selected by the countries, and Japan did not choose The Boy and the Heron and did not choose Monster. They went with Perfect Days, which from what I understand is solid enough to be a contender. I think I am just a little bit upset because it did seem like The Boy and the Heron was well liked enough that it conceivably could have gotten the nomination, which would have been historic, the first narrative animated film to be nominated in this category. But what are you gonna do? I moved Teacher's Lounge up here. Society of the Snow, I think, could get on, but yeah, there still are a lot of question marks about some of these films, but it is starting to come together slowly. Now, for Best Animated Feature, there really isn't that much to say about the category itself. The only significant update is we have the trailer for Chicken Run, which doesn't look that promising, to be honest, but Aardman does have a really good track record with getting nominated in this category. But I will use this opportunity to talk about Spider-Verse because I am not as confident as I once was about it getting into picture. So, when it first premiered, the hype was over the roof, and when it won HTA Mid-Season Awards for Picture and Director, I was really thinking that it was going to happen. But what happened is, first with Barbenheimer and now with the fall film festivals, it feels like less and less people are talking about Spider-Verse, and it feels like there are so many bigger contenders that a lot of other people who did at one point have Spider-Verse getting nominated have taken it out, and I am going to err on the side of caution with it in Best Picture, which means I also need to be careful where I have it in other categories. But it still definitely could happen, and it's going to be a really interesting race to see if it does happen, but like, I was really getting excited. I was really getting excited. Please don't let this be another failure. Well, at least I probably more likely to get at least one nomination outside of animated feature. It's not going to do what Pinocchio did last year. Now, going into Best Sound, so one of the big updates I have is Poor Things. So this is a movie that had its premiere, and from what we understand, this is definitely one of the top awards contenders of the year. This is probably the movie that most people are coming out of the festivals going, yes, 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 this is something that a lot of people can get behind. It is interesting because I've heard that it's not the most pleasant film, especially in the first hour, and that it has, like, hardcore sex scenes, which I do wonder exactly how universal and accessible it's going to be for some of the older Academy voters, but it clearly has the passion to be a top contender, so I have it getting on in a lot of categories. Now, one thing I will say, Ferrari, this is one of the few categories where I mentioned Ferrari. I was starting to wonder if that was going to be a bigger contender when the TV trailer, no, when the teaser trailer came out. Sorry, I can't talk today. And it was a really, really well edited trailer, and I was like, ooh, what is this movie? Does it have something special up its sleeve? And ultimately, people were like, it's fine. I don't really think it's going to be a big contender. Maybe for sound, maybe for supporting actress. And then The Killer actually seems to be a bit of a disappointment. People are like, it's fine, but it's like pulpy. It's kind of a B movie, which is weird for David Fincher. It's almost like he got done doing Mank, which was such a big awardsy film, and he's like, screw it, I'm gonna follow that up by making something that's just for me. And I think people aren't saying The Killer is actively bad, but it's not one of Fincher's best, and it's not gonna be an awards contender from the look of it. Best Original Song, not a whole lot has changed here. We now know there's a song in Rustin, which can be a contender, and we know of the Flora and Son songs, Meet in the Middle seems to be the one getting the most attention, but I don't really know if either one of those are gonna make it. I do think the top 5 is very strong. I do think both Barbie songs are gonna contend. We still have to wait to see if Color Purple has a song, but we don't know. Best Original Score, not much to say with this one. This is one of the few categories where I still have Spider-Verse getting on, although I don't know for sure. Foe, I don't think Foe's had its premiere yet, but I think that should be coming up pretty soon. And then Napoleon, yeah, Foe and Napoleon are two of the movies that we still don't know anything about. At this point, most of the big contenders have been seen. Yeah, I will never officially move Indiana Jones out of the top 10 because John Williams is always a contender, even if no one particularly likes the movie. Now, oh boy, so now we come to the category that gives me a literal headache every time I think about it, Best Visual Effects. I don't know what to do in this category. Now, because Poor Things is being considered a top contender in Best Picture, I have moved that to number 1. But it still could be Guardians of the Galaxy, depending on whether or not people want to reward Marvel. Now that it looks like the VFX artists are officially striking, that it is going to be interesting to see if people want to go with Marvel and finally give them a win in visual effects, or how they feel about it. It's funny, because even though I'm talking about Guardians of the Galaxy as a serious contender, I don't have Quantumania or the Marvels contending at all. I don't think either of those stand a reasonable chance. Also, the Marvels is probably going to get delayed, given the fact that VFX artists are striking. So, I don't know. Dungeons and Dragons, I'm surprising not a lot of people are talking about that. That is an early year hit that a lot of people seem to generally like and has some nice effects. It's one of the few movies that doesn't really have a knock against it, so I do think it stands a reasonable shot at getting on. And then Spider-Verse, funnily enough, this is maybe the category where I'm the most confident in it getting nominated outside of animated feature, which I normally wouldn't be because they've never gone for a pure CG animated film like this. But again, the category is just so weak, and so many people are praising the look of that film. And then I did very reluctantly add the creator in. I just hope that the offending shot at the Beirut explosion is removed from the finished film. But outside of that, I just don't know what to do. Any of these could contend. And Oppenheimer, I just don't think Oppenheimer is going to get the nomination, but if it gets the nomination, it's winning. It's in a really difficult spot right now, because there's really not that much VFX shots in the film, and yes, they loved the movie, but they loved Everything Everywhere too, and that couldn't make the shortlist. So I just worry there's not going to be enough on display for the VFX artists to really get excited. So, man, I just don't know what to do in this category. Okay, best makeup and hairstyling. Okay, so one thing that has changed is that I have added Naiad because I've heard a lot of people really single out the makeup that is done to her face and body as she goes through the swim, which I think there's going to be enough there. Plus, as we'll get to in lead actress, I think there's enough there that the performance could potentially be a top contender, and they love when a movie is contending for a performance, sometimes the makeup can get dragged along in that discussion too. So, outside of that, really nothing notable to say here. In costume design, okay, so I feel a little bit weird about this, but I have Poor Things, Barbie, Color Purple, Killers of the Flower Moon, and then Priscilla is number 5. And I don't really know what to put at number 5. And I acknowledge it could be Chevalier or Firebrand as the one random lone costume nominee, but I almost feel like Priscilla, this might be a good place to give that potentially its lone nomination. That movie has premiered, but sort of to mixed to okay reviews. I don't know if it's going to go really far in the race. Doesn't seem like the sort of thing that would. So maybe a lone costume nomination does make sense for that kind of film. And then for Best Production Design, oh yeah, I forgot to mention, but for costume design, I did have Poor Things winning, and now for production design, I have Poor Things at number 2. This is interesting, because Poor Things does have very flashy costume design and production design, as was seen in the trailer, and now that the movie is getting these kind of reviews and people say it's a top contender in Best Picture, now we have to have an interesting conversation, because with Barbie, that movie also has very flashy costume design and production design, and there was sort of an assumption that Barbie was going to win production design, if nothing else. Like, the production design win is absolutely in the bag. Now, people are saying that Poor Things could potentially upset in production design, or it could potentially take both. Now, my opinion, I think that there's gonna be a split, because these two movies are both really well liked and they're both contending for picture. I think Barbie is going to triumph in production design, because they had to create the whole Barbie land, and it's really impressive, the set that they were able to build. But I think Poor Things is going to triumph in costume design, because the costumes, they are period accurate, and with Barbie, they're more just recreations of the doll clothes, and I think it does make sense that with both of these two movies, kind of like with the sound categories, you would see sometimes two movies split. I think that production design and costume design sometimes go to the same movie, but I think in this instance, you're gonna see a split between Barbie and Poor Things, and this just makes sense to me. I don't really think there's anything else major to say, so with cinematography, this is usually the one where I have the least to say, and I kind of do too. Not a whole lot to really get involved. Oh, I did take out El Conde because I think that movie didn't get the best kind of reviews, but it's still in the conversation, because sometimes they just randomly go for minimalist black and white. Not really a whole lot else to say here. I think I covered a lot of this on in previous videos. In the case of Best Film Editing, I've moved Poor Things up and taken Color Purple out. And yeah, that's all there is to say about that. This is the awkward part of the video. Yeah, so much to say at the beginning, not a whole lot to say in the middle. And now we come to the screenplay categories. And some of you may notice that my voice sounds a little bit different, and that's because I am recording this on a separate day, because just as I was about to start editing the video, I found out that Barbie has officially switched from adapted screenplay, where we all assumed it would be contending, to original screenplay, and that certainly throws a wrench in things. So Killers of the Flower Moon, Poor Things, and Oppenheimer are all very likely to still be nominated in adapted screenplay, but the last two slots are tricky. And honestly, before I moved Barbie, I was very, very torn on whether Dumb Money or All of Us Strangers would receive the lone screenplay nomination, and ultimately I decided to give it to both of them. I do think Spider-Verse is close, but it's going to be very, very hard for that to get nominated if it doesn't have a corresponding Best Picture nomination. Then again, maybe the field is a little bit weaker now that Barbie's not there, but we don't know how well Foe's going to do. And also, American Fiction is another movie that could potentially be a lone screenplay nominee, but I think it might be a little too mainstream comedy for that. As of right now, I do think Dumb Money does make a little bit more sense as a lone screenplay nominee type film, because it's a sort of smart, funny, quick-witted thing that they do go for that's relevant on top of that. All of Us Strangers, I don't know about, but I'm not really sure what else to put in there. And as for original screenplay, this is where things get really interesting, because I said at one point in time that Past Lives was by far and away the frontrunner here, but now that Holdovers and Barbie are also here, I'm not so sure. I'm still gonna give Past Lives the edge, mainly because I still want to think it can be the frontrunner in Best Picture, but I don't think it's a sure thing. And as I'll get to later, like, I don't know how shaky Past Lives is overall with all of these new releases. Holdovers, I don't think I've actually mentioned this, I'm going to have to reiterate here. This is the type of movie that is really, really making a splash at the film festivals, and it's funny, back when Air first came out, I'm like, oh, don't underestimate the feel-good dad movie, but it looks like Holdovers is taking the slot that Air previously held. So, I no longer have Air predicting to get the nomination, though I think it's close, and I do think we have a pretty solid top 5 now. I will mention Saltburn. That's a movie that I think, from what I understand, could be a lone screenplay nominee, but it might be a little bit too divisive. It's not entirely the sophomore slump that The Sun was last year, but it doesn't seem to be as universally acclaimed as Promising Young Woman was, and even though there are a number of people that really do stick up for that movie, I don't think Saltburn is going to get the type of universal appeal, not the campaign in Best Picture, surely. It could still get this lone screenplay nominee, but I just don't know. And it is going to be very curious watching Past Lives, Holdovers, and Barbie all with a legitimate claim at the original screenplay title. So, we'll have to wait and see. Now, in the category of Best Supporting Actor, okay, so a lot to say here. Poor Things is getting very strong notices for both Ruffalo and Willem Dafoe. I decided to put in Ruffalo but not Dafoe, while acknowledging that they could both easily get on. Dominic Sessa, I have him on for The Holdovers. That seems like a sort of, in a similar vein as the actor from Manchester by the Sea. I'm blanking on his name. Why am I Lucas Hedges? Oh my god. Now you know these are candid and record. I don't script these. But the big thing is I have taken out both Coleman Domingo for Color Purple and John Magaro for Past Lives. Now, Coleman Domingo, without spoiling it, I do think he has a better chance of getting in for lead actor. And John Magaro, it's funny, I do these in the same order that you see them, starting with sound and song and score, and then working my way up to Best Picture. And so, when I first got to supporting actor, I still had John Magaro in the top 5. But then when I got to Best Actor and Best Actress, and both those categories have gotten a lot more competitive because of the festival premieres, and I wasn't sure if I could make a strong enough case for Tia Yu and Greta Lee to get those nominations. And then I went, well, wait, does that mean that John Magaro is the lone acting nominee for the movie? And to be honest, it feels weird for him to get on and the other two to miss. Like, it's one of those all or nothing situations. It's a trio. Either they all get on or none of them get on. Plus, I don't know if the Academy wants to deal with the situation of, hey, we didn't nominate the 2 Asian actors, but we nominated the white actor. Like, that is a bad look, and I think they acknowledge that would be a bad look. So, my gut is telling me that Magaro is gonna miss, even though that is a great performance and that character is a big part of what makes the movie so special. I don't know if Magaro is gonna get on, and it hurts to say, but as of right now, I have Magaro just barely missing. In supporting actress, there's not a whole lot to say. Gladstone and Brooks are still 1 and 2, but Divine Joy Randolph, from what I understand, is a big scene stealer in The Holdovers and is definitely going to contend for that film. And Emily Blunt is still getting on, and then Jodie Foster for Naiad. I do think if you're going to predict Foster, you also have to predict Benning. I don't know if I can necessarily see one getting in without the other, but I think that movie really is shaping up to be a two-hander between these two great actresses, and so Foster should, in all likelihood, get on. Now, I'm sort of making the decision here that only one of the 2 Color Purple actresses is going to really contend, so I have Brooks over Henson. Maybe when the movie premieres, we'll feel differently about it. Viola Davis, though, is interesting because I still have Air getting in for screenplay, but as it stands, I have it as a lone screenplay nomination. But Davis is still so beloved, and she did just barely miss last year for Woman King after getting on for every precursor. So she could definitely still be in the race, and I wouldn't be surprised to see her show up with like a Globe nomination and or a SAG nomination, like just enough that she's still in the conversation, but maybe miss in the end, because it is looking to be really tight. I will say Penelope Cruz in Ferrari, I've heard that she's maybe the best thing in that movie, and she did recently get a surprise nomination for Parallel Mothers, so maybe we shouldn't entirely be writing her out. Now, for Best Actor, as stated before, I've moved out Tiu Yu, and I have replaced him with Coleman Domingo, because this is a really showy biopic role from what I've heard, and he's definitely going to be in the hunt. Now, I've also heard very good things about Andrew Scott and Jeffrey Wright and Barry Keoghan, and all of them are going to be around the conversation, but I don't know how well the movies are going to do overall. Domingo feels like the right person to overcome the mixed reviews of the movie overall and be the face of the movie and be the lone Best Actor contender, because I think he's someone that has been admired for a really long time, and if he has this and Color Purple, I feel like he's got to get nominated for one of them. And so initially I had him more likely to get on for Color Purple, but now after seeing the Rustin reviews, it makes sense that he would get on for Rustin. I will say when it comes to the win, I still have Bradley Cooper for right now, but watch out for Paul Giamatti. I think it could be him. It really is going to depend on if people really go hard for Maestro or people think that Cooper is trying too hard. And it's interesting because Maestro has premiered, but I haven't really said a whole lot about it because it's kind of like it's exactly what people were expecting based on the trailer. Like, good movie, handsomely made. This is obviously going to be Netflix's big push this year, but I don't know if there's enough true passion for it that it's going to get nominations, but I don't know how well it's going to do in terms of wins. Now, for Best Actress, this is where it gets really tough. I hate how competitive this is. So first of all, Emma Stone is now my number one. Based on everything that has been said about her performance, she not only is this the best performance of her career, but it's also a performance that elevates the movie and makes the movie as good as it is, and this role so easily could have been a misfire in the hands of a different actress, but Emma Stone just nails it and absolutely runs away with the movie. Now, I still think she's a little on the young side to have 2 Oscars, but I think for right now it makes sense to have her in the number 1 position. But Carey Mulligan, if people do really go hard for Maestro, then Mulligan could be in a good position to win, as you can say the same thing about Annette Bening. Because Bening is a really, really overdue actress. People have been making that argument for a long time that she should have won for American Beauty, and it just seems like she's really, really going for it. The role is clear Oscar bait. She trained for a year to do this movie. I don't know. Clearly Emma Stone has the big hype from the festivals right now, but Bening could get a hard push. Of course, Netflix is going to have to decide if they're going to campaign Mulligan or Bening. And as of right now, Bening might be the only nominee who is not in a Best Picture nominee. So that's tough. And it's also tough that I had to take out Greta Lee and Margot Robbie, by the way, and I was the person early on being like, I don't know why people aren't predicting Margot Robbie. She's definitely going to get nominated, but now I have her out because this top 5 is just so strong. I look at these top contenders, and there's no way Emma Stone is missing. There's no way Carey Mulligan is missing. Bening, maybe she could miss because the movie isn't really a top Best Picture contender, but from what I've heard, it would be pretty shocking for her to miss. And then Sandra Hüller, from what I've heard, the performance is simply undeniable. I do want to caution people, though, because it is very, very difficult for foreign language performances to get nominated, especially when the actor or actress is not a household name in the US. But from what I've heard, like, the performance is just impossible to ignore. And Fantasia Barrino, even though we haven't seen that movie yet, we know how striking and baity that role is when performed right. So there's I just don't know if I can deny anybody in this top 5, which means I unfortunately have to deny Greta Lee and Margot Robbie, even though they're right there, and they're both headlining these top Best Picture contenders, and they should be getting on. But Greta Lee, I worry that what she's doing is just a little bit too subtle, and she doesn't go as big as some of the other contenders. And Margot Robbie is going big, but comedic performances don't get that appreciation, even though she's headlining a really strong Best Picture movie. It's just so tough, and at this point, I would be surprised if anybody from outside the top 7 gets nominated because it's such a strong top 7. And now we come to Best Director, and frankly, I just have to laugh. I really do. Because 2 months ago, I was going on and on about how tight the top 6 was, and how it was really, really hard for me to decide who goes in number 5 and who goes in number 6. It was either Gerwig or Glazer, and I was like, oh, I just wish this top 5 would get a little bit less competitive. And then the next month, Denis Villeneuve for Dune Part 2 dropped out of the race, and I was like, perfect, I can put both Gerwig and Glazer on. This is really good. And then, wouldn't you know it, Poor Things comes out, and it becomes very clear that Yorgos Lanthimos is a top contender. He just slides in there right in Villeneuve's spot. And now I'm right back where I started with trying to figure out whether Gerwig or Glazer is going to get on. Although, I will say, I have started to wonder if Zone of Interest or Anatomy of a Fall, which of those two movies is going to be the top contender for international feature. It potentially could only I don't know if they're both going to get nominated for Best Picture, or is only one of them going to get nominated. And so for right now, it's probably safest to just say Gerwig is going to get on at number 5, and Glazer and Trier, whichever one of those movies succeeds. Even though I feel like one of them, there has to be an international slot. And there is a slight part of me that's like, is it really a smart idea to still have Celine's song at number 1? Am I really still that confident in the movie overall? And I'll get to that in a second. But even if Past Lives does win Best Picture, could someone else take director? Could Lanthimos take director? Or Nolan or Scorsese? It's really tough. I don't really know what to do in this category. So let's just jump to Best Picture, which is another category where I don't really know what to do. It's funny because you'd think that actually letting us see the movies would solve a lot of problems for us, and yet in some cases it leaves us with more questions than answers. So, of the top 10, the only movie I have in the top 10 that has not been seen yet is Color Purple, which could turn out to be a big disappointment, we don't know, but right now I have faith that it won't be a disappointment. And that means it does unfortunately make sense that I have to take out Across the Spider-Verse, but it's sitting just on the edge, and there is a world where it still gets on. I don't know with Zone of Interest or Anatomy of a Fall. I'm banking on the idea that both of them can get the nomination, but I don't know if that's actually going to be the case. Maybe only one of them does. Anatomy of a Fall is well liked, and it seems like it's the more accessible film, but Zone of Interest, everyone who sees it walks out of being like, that movie changed my life, and it will be played in schools for generations. But I don't know. So far, only festival audiences have seen it. What happens when just casual moviegoers start watching these? I just don't know. So as of right now, I'm hedging my bets, and I predict that both movies will get nominated. And then Spider-Verse is just sitting outside the top 10, and then everything else is a maybe contender that I don't fully know about. But the real question is what's winning Best Picture? So, I saw Past Lives and was like, there it is. that is going to be our Best Picture winner. I felt pretty confident that people were going to flock to this movie and love it. And even when Across the Spider-Verse beat it for the HCA Mid-Season Awards, it's funny, I kept pointing to that as a positive for Spider-Verse, but I never pointed to it as a negative for Past Lives. I was like, oh, Past Lives doesn't really need to win that. People already love and appreciate that movie, and Spider-Verse needs the boost more than Past Lives does. But I am starting to wonder, okay, because it feels like less and less people are talking about Past Lives because of the Barbenheimer trend and then because of the fall film festivals. It kind of feels like people are moving on to other things. And so I don't know. Now, that does make sense. The question is, can Past Lives make a rebound later in the year when we get to the Critics Awards? Will more people be talking about Past Lives? Can it pull a coda where people see it early and then they come back to it and they're like, wait a minute, this is really good? Because I think Past Lives does have the passion to pull this sort of win off, but now I don't have it getting nominated for the acting awards, which, granted, it would not be the first Best Picture winner to win without the acting nominations, but a lot of the more recent ones have been with Asian casts, and there's sort of a, again, I don't know if that's a great look for the Academy. So, I don't know. I really don't know. And I sort of have Past Lives in there as a placeholder because at least it has the narrative. It has the small little indie that could narrative. And that's not a great narrative, but you always have to have a narrative. And right now, I don't know if I really see the Oppenheimer narrative, or the Poor Things narrative, or the Killers of the Flower Moon narrative. Maybe there's going to be one, but I don't actually know for sure. If anything, the only Best Picture nominee that definitely does have a narrative is Barbie, because it was this huge success that smashed the glass ceiling and got people talking about all these gender norms and the patriarchy. But I don't know. I think there's enough people that really, really don't like the movie that it could stop it from actually winning. Plus, it would be a weird movie to win, and it's so funny. After Everything Everywhere won Best Picture, I was like, I can no longer say that something is too weird for the Oscars, but I think this year that applies more in terms of what can be nominated for Best Picture, not in terms of what can win. And that's why it was surprising to me to see people walk out of Poor Things going, dude, that could win Best Picture. And I'm like, could it? I think with both Barbie and Poor Things, it would be a really bold statement on the Academy's part to give it to two crazy, crazy, bold, daring movies, genre films, in a row. And Poor Things is, from what I understand, is covering kind of similar ground to Barbie in terms of being about the patriarchy. And I do wonder, Poor Things might be seen as the more artistic film, but Barbie is the more accessible film. And so, I really don't know. I really don't know. Right now, I still have Past Lives in the number one position, but I'm not super confident about it anymore. So, yeah. Thank you guys very much for watching, and I will see you next time. Take care.